was, because, yeah.
Very good. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We will call the September 17th advisory committee meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Thanks for those of you who joined online. Thanks particularly for those of you that made it in here. Congratulations. One piece. So the first order of business is approval of minutes. Everybody have an opportunity to review.
I move approval.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Hicks. All in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Stuff and a mouth.
So unanimously,
Right, and I'm trying to get to where I see my. Okay.
Next up on the agenda there, Ms. Karen, Waste Management District grant updates.
Okay, so I was just going to give a quick update before we get started on the other section. We did end up receiving 6 applications for the Waste District grant. All of those applications were reviewed by our subcommittee, and we did end up with, if you take all the reviews and all the averages of the scores and put them in order, the top 2 actually fell under the budget. So we could theoretically ask the board to fund 2 of the projects. The third one, you know, if we, so basically our committee is going to decide what our top choices are. Like, this is what we have, and tell the board kind of like what we would like to do. But
Is the third one?
it would
If
be
it
a
were-
partial funding,
Okay.
and within their application, they did give contingency plans.
Mhm.
So we just kind of have a few choices to give to the board.
Did we like what they were going to do?
I mean, based on the scores, it ended up in the top 3. I only have gotten feedback from one other member saying just that giving the 2 is enough. So I did want to hear back from all the other committee members to know like what their opinions are. But by next Wednesday at the board meeting, we're going to have that on the agenda as giving a little short synopsis of what each of them was and what our recommendation is for funding. So
Will you also be giving the board your application? Partially, I'm interested from our standpoint as to what do we do next year? What did it look like this year?
yeah, and we have all of that, so we can definitely share that. I didn't really want to until the subcommittee all gave their.
How did what were their scores, compared to the maximum points available?
Well, the way we did it, it ended up being out of 5. So the top 3 were the 4 points.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they were pretty high.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially the first 2.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be, I just want to get feedback from the other subcommittee members if they would like to even ask the board to do a partial funding for the third choice, or if we just want to go with the 2. Either way, it is a little bit of work too, just to get their
Aren't any of them here today? No. I was trying to expedite things.
No, so just thought, yeah, it's completely up to the board. So we'll present more about
Extra funds carry over to next year.
it. All the funding, that does work how it works for the district budget. Yeah. And then of course we kind of just started with a $50,000 cap, and some of the applications really ask for all of it. But I think it's a good mix of that.
Very good.
And for what it's worth, one of our, not clients, but probably will soon be a client, said next year they would like to do something with mattresses,
Yes.
which would be so
I know, I
important.
didn't see it come through. I was
No, they just didn't feel like they could get it all figured out. But
Yeah.
we've done a whole bunch of research in 3 other nonprofit operated mattress recycling programs in this country, including the manager's name and phone number and email address and what it cost them to do this and how much space they need for this many mattresses, just to make it much easier for them.
All right, next item on the agenda. Welcome back, Morgan. About cost of services study.
Thank you.
I don't want to jump the gun here, but I know you were probably bombarded with questions last Friday.
We received questions from 3 people,
Okay.
but quite a few questions / comments. And what I've done is incorporate those into the presentation and go slide by slide.
Oh, good.
Here's a question, comment. So lots of content today.
So real quick, before I transfer the thing, I wanted to this is the slide I had from last month, kind of reiterating the assignment from the board, from the last board meeting, that they had asked us to dissect and share understanding and findings of the study back to the 109 board. Focus on cost basis, statements that are factual and statements containing bias. The task at hand, and I'm going to connect Morgan.
Look at that, it posts the instructions.
Even has step 1 and 2. for
Yeah.
those of us that are challenged.
There's a little bit.
Actually, nowadays they teach teachers to teach sequential stuff like this because kids get it now because of this stuff.
You're on the web.
Yeah,
Just
I'm
share.
just sharing it.
Unmute as well.
You minimize that pop-up.
Where's the presenter?
Or you can drag it back to your home screen, and that way it won't be up there.
I thought that would have been on Karen's screen. No.
On it.
Oh, I bet you, maybe you have to get out a slideshow to mess with that thing.
I had your cursor on there just a second ago, maybe to the left or the right.
Yeah.
Just drag the whole thing
Probably just backwards.
over. Drag it down there.
Brain challenge.
Nope, okay. Drag it.
Yeah, I'm trying to also do the presenter view, which I'm assuming be the presenter view.
Well, I will say we
Oh, that's also not doing anything.
can. That you
I guess we
also
can wait and
blind.
see if it covers up important real estate. I think you are in presenter mode, aren't you?
Well,
ignore
I
that
just
corner of the
changed
screen.
screens.
As long as it doesn't cover up important information, but we're gonna be looking at data
Is that I
tables.
just like changed the slide, so it's also not updating on that either.
Who's actually sharing? Karen, are you
I'm
sharing?
sharing.
Oh,
I just not sharing.
Yeah, you would think.
Way too many presentations, way too many.
so what did you have?
What happened
Just
anybody at
PowerPoint?
any time.
And there's always an audience to put extra pressure on you.
Did you record your presentations last week? I missed Tuesday. I see those.
And then you already tried hitting
Monday, we're doing our HasCom class again, the
Yeah.
online version. I'll be on vacation in New York City, so I have to host the meeting from my hotel room while Jason rides the trains.
That sounds fun.
I saved it to my desktop. All I need is an actual internet connection.
whatever's going on there is not
I should
showing
do it
up.
from the train station. Be a little more, adventurous.
Instead of sharing the PowerPoint, you just share it. Like if you stop.
That's what I was thinking.
So. Joel is sharing it now,
Oh, well, that actually might work better then.
but. Or,
Let's still not doing anything.
That wouldn't be fair.
you're on some different screen. You're sharing your screen.
If you put your cursor in that black spot between the down arrow and the red dot, and then click them,
Between 'em.
next to it, between there, yeah, click it and drag it toward your
Yeah.
monitor.
Click and
The whole
hold.
thing will
It's,
probably
but that's not on
It's
her
not.
computer. Like, whatever,
Oh, yeah.
that is just a completely different thing.
So
It's not
if
even
she
showing
stops sharing and that goes away, won't it show up underneath then
No,
on her
because that's-
screen?
That's her connection to the meeting.
Right, but
You are screen sharing, but what I see on the WebEx is Harold.
I'm thinking, why don't we just have Harold share the PowerPoint, then he can just follow me through and then I can at least go through my notes of the first interview.
Still have to share.
Because it has to go to the
Your
web.
computer is sharing a screen.
Okay,
Nothing
what
to do
if
with WebEx.
Harold shares to WebEx and you connect there and then does that work?
Like you,
Like I disconnect, you, share your screen and just
the
show.
only thing that's useful for audio.
and we're not in our usual space.
And also, Diana, I got
3 miles.
Oh, I thought you already did.
Pretty enough the trash.
Beg your pardon?
It's pretty enough the trash.
Yeah.
train.
There's also a hell of a lot of streets that are blocked off there.
You're not even sharing anymore, and that's
One
still
morning I
up there,
needed
so
to do
that's- I don't
3
think that's
workarounds to
worse.
get to the office 4 miles from home.
Are we sure that's not okay?
Right,
And disconnected.
'Cause she wasn't sharing.
well, it
anymore.
involves
Thing was that
interstate
window was
highways
still up.
and railroads. Do I need to say any more?
So if we go back to Karen, can run the slide.
The
over
interstate, underneath the interstate in 3 places inside the water
I'm
centers.
interested to see.
The
what-
roads are shut off.
Yeah,
Eventually, they're gonna shut off I-65 inside the water center. River Road and 42. What about 22? That,
Yeah.
Or, well,
I don't think it'll help you much, but
well, I have my audio
Yeah,
on,
okay.
so everyone can hear me.
to get here, right. Pick up kids from daycare at $1 a minute.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did.
We need more cars,
Perfect.
get cars off the road.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Set up now what falls in. I was able to see the screen. Falls here.
Yeah, we
They
can't.
can hear you, I'm just gonna.
Well, Greg is trying to say something and we can't hear him.
Henry's talking to his wife in the
Well,
next
my
room.
computer is clearly.
Looks frozen to me.
Morgan, you can have the floor. Let's go ahead and roll.
All right,
Yes, it is.
well, let's get started since we have about 50 slides to get through, so. Harold, thank you for sharing. If you can just follow along. I guess I'll just tell you next slide when I'm ready. So this is the agenda for today. I think I'm gonna skip through who we are and our team. I'll just briefly show those slides. We'll go through the project details, what the objectives were, the known challenges, what our approach was, the findings, and the next steps. Then we'll get into the comments and questions that we received in order from Bob, Sandra, Bruce, and then we'll go to Q&A if we still have time, hoping that we do. So next slide, please. Okay, let's skip past the who is Raftelis. Briefly touch on our team and roles. One more, Harold, thanks. So I'm Morgan McCarthy. I serve as the project manager for this project. Jennifer Porter and Harold worked with me on this project as well. They were also in all of the bi-weekly meetings. Jennifer served as the project director and Harold was support, data analysis, GIS, a little bit of everything. Next slide. Okay, so the project objectives when we got brought in to do this were to basically make sure that our recommendations were in line with the solid waste management 5-year plan for Kentucky, assessing whether the proposed changes to the solid waste and recycling services transition to a different system would make sense based on the data gathering and analysis that we had done, and then provide recommendations for improvement based on that information. Additionally, with goals of oversight, transparency, and financial accountability. Next slide. The known challenges when we were brought into this were identified in the RFQ when we originally responded to it, including inefficiency of multiple haulers in the unincorporated areas, which is about 40% of the solid waste management area, non-participation in certain subscription-based services, which was about 3% or 3,200 households, inconsistent or overly complex communication between the haulers, causing confusion between who you had a hauler, whether or not you could recycle certain things. Also having no official technical assistance or outreach programs because of the varying haulers, and then ineffective bulky waste collection system in the urban services district. Next slide. So this was the overall project approach. We started with the, sorry, go ahead.
There's so much glare, it's making it really hard to read. If I turn off these overhead lights, will that bother anybody? Or am I the only one who's got a glare problem? Okay. Yeah, from our perspective, but I bet they see this one. Okay.
It's kind of like a level.
Yeah, maybe that'll solve it, but it's really significant. Sorry,
That's better.
It's good, it's manageable. Still bad, but it's manageable. If you see me moving around, I'm adjusting to read something.
Okay, I can also provide the PowerPoint slide deck. It is currently in our SharePoint folder, but it can be shared with everyone here as well. So our project approach was basically to start with the initiation and the ongoing project management was we began the project October of 2024. We have recorded the bi-weekly meetings and we still have those ongoing, which we will continue to have until project completion. Next task was the waste assessment and cost analysis. So this was the data gathering, finding the existing waste management practices, conducting the detailed analysis. Originally, there were 3 options proposed in the RFQ, and we responded to it that they wanted us to analyze. At the very beginning of the project, though, he directed us to not even option 2. So we really only looked at option 1, which was no change, current services and rates, just getting the status quo. And then option 3, which is the exclusive franchise zones, multi-hauler system with single hauler per zone. So based on that, those were the 2 options where we could recommend things. We also considered optimized service levels, frequency of collection, type of service, etc. At the zip code level, determine the cost per household, cost effectiveness for each zip code or group of zip codes, and then we additionally looked at factors affecting the cost, such as distance traveled, volume of waste collected, etc. Now we're currently in the top 3-4 area where we have the draft report, and we're presenting obviously to the advisory committee today, 109 board next week, as well as providing the final report, or at least that's the current plan, right before that board meeting as well. Next slide. So just to reiterate, these were the bi-weekly recurring meetings. These are all the people that were invited every week. I would say the majority of them generally showed up. We do have a new addition, Robert, and evidently Sumida is gone, so obviously so is Pete. Question, next slide. So this is the map overlay of the entire area. It's a little hard to see, but the darker areas, that's the Louisville Metro Urban Services District. The red areas are the home rule cities, and the light blue, bright blue color is the unincorporated areas. Next slide, please. Okay. So our key findings for the project were that there are inconsistent service and pricing disparities, mainly in the open market system, resulting in wide variation in cost, quality, and access. Some households lacking curbside recycling or yard waste entirely, and really the pricing variation, sometimes over 100% depending on the location. We found that franchising could improve the equity, and since like its own franchise system would ensure standardized, and through that mechanism, it would establish enforceable performance standards through actual franchise agreements. Be cost competitive over time. We modeled the household costs under a franchise system, and they were comparable to or lower than current rates, particularly in the rural zones where competition and economies of scale are limited. And then the environmental infrastructure benefits. So streamlining the routes, reducing truck traffic, lower emissions, improving neighborhood safety, and minimizing street wear. Contracts could also incentivize the clean fuel vehicles and support broader sustainability goals. So the next steps would be updating the report based on the questions, comments that we have received to date, as well as any other data received from private haulers if provided. Obviously, we are very open to any private data you guys would like to provide. The next would be providing the final report, final presentation of the 109 board. Then the board would vote. Option 1 is board approval, and it move through, whether we would start with public education, launching a pilot franchise zone, which is what we had recommended because that made the most sense, at least in one zone to start with that before rolling out for the 6 zones, ensuring legal preparedness, updating governance framework, and collaborating with home rule cities, any of which, they were willing to participate. That would be wonderful. If not, they can do whatever they want. Option 2 was rejecting that recommendation, and option 3 is obviously we can definitely evaluate other scenarios. It just wasn't part of the current scope. Next slide, please. It'd be helpful to go through the pros and cons of what the exclusive versus an open market look like, at least from a residential perspective and also from a hauler perspective. Since we don't have a lot of time here, I'm thinking we might skip past that and just get to the comments and questions. Everyone's okay with that, and you guys can look at this later, or do you want me to go through it?
I think we can look at that later
If
and
you
get
send
on
us
to
a
the
slide,
comments.
that would be great.
Absolutely. Okay, Errol, let's skip to comments received. Perfect. All right, we'll start with Bob, then we'll go to Sandra and Bruce. And let's see, next slide. So the next few slides of this just kind of show what we actually received. Let's get to Bob's first slide, Harold. Perfect. All right, so this was one of the main arguments in his letter. Basically, the NWRA expresses concern that a single hauler franchise model can drive out smaller businesses and reduce competition. We wanted to be clear that the intent of the franchise model is not to eliminate the private sector or competition. Rather, it aims to structure competition in a way that secures the best overall value, consistent service, and universal access for the public. Franchise models create competition for the contract itself, which can lead to a robust bidding process where companies, including local firms or those partnering with smaller entities, on service quality, innovation, and price over a defined term. This shifts the focus from the daily street-by-street competition to a more strategic community-wide competition for providing the best public service.
Come again.
So we're saying that we understand where he's coming from, at least at threatening competition and small business. I realize that that's the fear, particularly for small companies, because we only analyzed the 2 different scenarios and didn't really dive into potentially what that would look like if it was rolled out. It wouldn't necessarily cut out any of the small businesses. So that's basically what we're saying there.
So you're actually saying there's another step involved in this whole process where you actually look at what model would you create, how many districts, and how would the districts be structured?
Right. So we originally just considered the 6 zones because, like I said, it was the 2 options. We weren't proposing on any other scenarios. That wasn't part of the scope. We would love to provide more options if that's, part of the idea. But like I said, it wouldn't necessarily cut out the small businesses, especially having worked for small trash companies. I understand that fear that you're going to get cut out, big haulers will take over, etc. But there is also, I would say, a pro to the franchise zones. Particularly, there's a way for them to stay in, and I would say modeling what that would actually look like, it would definitely take some more analysis.
But you're not proposing, for the sake of argument, a single trash holder per zone.
Yes, she is.
We are currently,
But
because
that-
like I said, of the
That's
2,
what you were asked to do,
right,
but that wouldn't necessarily have to be structured.
correct. There's definitely other options.
So I would expect that if we were to do this, we would have a request for proposals with certain guidelines, just like we did for this granting program. We'd have a scoring rubric, et cetera.
Right.
Would we first do a request for qualifications? And the reason I ask is if we put down on paper how many trucks, how many people, et cetera, do we think you need to have in order to realistically be a winner for one district? Could that put some of this stuff to bed?
I think so, definitely. And part of what I think that would look like, especially after you do an RFP and you're proposing, say, a franchise zone, for instance, you know, the rollout isn't immediate. So it definitely would also give smaller companies the opportunity to get the funding they would need to purchase additional carts, additional trucks, et cetera. So like I said, it wouldn't necessarily cut them out. There are definitely opportunity for them to stay in. And I don't think that was the original intent.
We're not at the point where we could come up with the details that she's talking about. That's why you're proposing something beforehand where we take a look at it and come up with some of those.
Right. So basically, like I said, there were the three options that are going to be presented, obviously, to the 109 board. If they want us to look into additional scenarios, we would love to do that. Like I said, the additional scenario could be something different from just the 6 zones. We can model other things and see what potentially would actually work the best given the entire system that we've already looked at.
I mean, theoretically, if we were worried about somebody getting cut out, we could do more than 6 zones. We could technically do 26 minus the ones that are.
Split zones.
Yeah,
So
so I think this is a solvable problem, if indeed it's a problem.
Actually, the other component that we haven't discussed yet is how do we create the zones, who's in charge of the zones? How does the zone make a determination as to who the waste on it's going to be? I mean, all that's not done.
Yeah, but GIS would be pretty good at figuring out. And I bet you used GIS, didn't you?
Yes, we have a substantial amount of data in the GIS system, and that's kind of how we did the zones, particularly. We'll get to it shortly, but there a number of things were considered. Let me move forward and we'll be able to show a slide about that as well, just for the sake of time.
So I have a question. So you're proposing 6 zones. How many current haulers do we have working in the whole county? Is it 6? 6. So if all the haulers bid on all the zones, theoretically, one of the companies is going to have the best, cheapest proposal, and one of the companies is going to have the highest proposal. We're just going to say, well, this zone, you have to pay this higher rate because you get this hauler, and this zone pays this lower rate because
But each
we
of
gave
the
it to the low
zones
bidder, or
is
does
how
the low
much
bidder
it
get
is.
all the zones?
Yeah, but the zones, for example, some zones are much larger than other zones. Some zones have very dense housing, some don't. I mean, there's no homogeneity on housing. So you wouldn't end up with, at least I don't think you'd end up with the same rates in all the zones anyway.
But we could also say no one company can win more than 3 zones or something
Oh,
to
yeah.
preserve competition.
I mean, you also have the opportunity to just award a zone to each of the 6 haulers. I mean, you guys have the option to do a number of things.
We have
So,
armed insurrection
Right.
if that happens.
okay, let's go to the, we're already at the next slide. Okay, so this was one of the next complaints. So the NWRA cited the survey data indicating public support for consumer choice. We understand the value of the residents' place on choice. But however, in the current system, the choice is often accompanied by significant inconsistencies, such as highly varied pricing, different service levels, and sometimes no choice at all for certain residents, particularly areas are not being serviced by more than one hauler. A structured system aims to guarantee a baseline of high quality, affordable service for every household, ensuring everyone has access to the essentials rather than leaving it to the individual negotiation or varying market conditions. So this would prioritize universal access and equitable outcomes over a fragmented menu of options that may not serve all equally well. Let's go to the next slide. Okay.
When Harold is kind of putting in a little added.
Oh, thank you, Harold. So here the NWRA is concerned about increased bureaucracy and administrative costs. We also did receive numerous questions, or a couple questions actually, from Bruce and Sandra about that, which we'll go into a little more detail later. But any system, current or proposed, has administrative overhead. We need to evaluate whether the administrative costs of a structured system are offset by significant benefits like route optimization, reduced traffic congestion from fewer trucks, standardized pricing, universal service provision, and more effective environmental program management. The current fragmented system also incurs costs, whether it's a cost of varied resident burdens, increased illegal dumping management, or the lack of coordinated data for planning. A comprehensive analysis needs to weigh all of these costs and benefits. Next slide. So this was one of the last, I would say, issues that brought up by the NWRA. Studies suggest that a more integrated system has the potential for significant improvements. For example, optimizing routes countywide can reduce fuel consumption and emissions. Standardized safety protocols across fewer operators can enhance worker and public safety. And economically, transparent pricing can lead to a better value for money for residents. Regarding the environmental impact, coordinated approach allows for more efficient implementation of recycling and waste reduction programs across the entire county, which can be harder to achieve in a fragmented system. So,
I wonder if we need to turn these other ones off. Okay.
Harold, can you go to Sandra's first question? Okay. I'm not going to read this to you guys, but essentially it's questioning the 2277 monthly amount regarding the sources and where everything comes from. So to explain, the 2277 per household per month represents a portion of the USD property tax allocated specifically to the solid waste services over a 10-year forecast to encompass the capital costs of equipment replacements and fluctuating repair maintenance costs based on the age of equipment within the fleet. This was calculated from the Metro Public Works internal budget for USD waste operations, covering all expenses for residential garbage, recycling, yard waste, and bulk item collection in the USD. The item added within this calculation included designated fleet replacement based on the existing fleet. In other words, that 2277 includes the full suite of waste services, weekly trash, bi-weekly recycling, seasonal yard waste, and up to 4 bulky pickups a year, plus the associated costs of staff, truck fuel, and maintenance, equipment replacement, and program overhead. No other non-waste services are part of that 2277. The USC tax funds several services, but the analysis isolated the solid waste portion via Metro's cost allocation.
So for example, litter pickup isn't showing up there, right?
Correct. Okay, next slide, please. So the amounts from or why was a 10-year forecast used. So in the report, table 1 summarized the USD's waste service cost components on a per household basis using the 10-year financial projection to smooth out year-to-year fluctuations. Each line item, fleet replacement at about 162 per month, came from the Metro Public Works budget data and the 10-year capital plan for equipment. Specifically, the model assumed a new Class 8 semi-automated rear loader garbage truck costs about $300,000 and has 7 to 8 year life. This assumes an ASL is approximately 420,000 per truck. That cost amortized per household over the fleet's life yields the monthly fleet replacement cost around 160 to 170 per month. Year one of the forecast corresponds to the 2025 year, the current budget year, and future years were escalated with standard factors such as 3% annual inflation for operating costs. The 10-year average was used to show a more sustainable long-term cost. Like I said, it smooths out the spikes such as a big truck purchase in year 8. In summary, the table 1 components are grounded in document maintenance, insurance, overhead, etc. Projected forward and life cycle replacements. We will add a narrative in the report to explain how each component, like the fleet cost, for instance, was derived from Metro's data and industry standards.
Part of the reason I asked that was because it was very clear that Metro didn't have a replacement plan, whereas we were hearing from the waste haulers that they did.
Right.
So are they proposing 10-year contracts for these franchises?
We were proposing a certain number of years for the franchises.
So can you calculate a 5-year, which is typically a city contract is 5 years?
Yeah.
It's actually 1
The
for
tables-
1-year
the
renewals.
tables got every year.
I
Right.
mean, the logic I see is those trucks probably run on the streets for about 10 years, maybe a little less, but I bet you
Right.
those trucks are driven for more than 5 or 3.
Definitely.
Well,
And
it
the 10-year
directly
would
relates
allow,
to
like I said,
how long
to
is your
even out the
contract.
fluctuations.
No, I know I'm saying, but I think if you want to really know what does it cost in the city to do this, she's got to move it out to a broader period because of how long that very expensive line item lasts on the road.
But if I only have a contract for 5 years, I can't bid that number.
Well, that's,
Yeah, generally speaking, I would say most exclusive franchises will last for about 10 years, mostly because you're considering the amount of capital costs that would go into buying new equipment, et cetera. Most companies, depending on how big they are, especially if it's a smaller company, they're going to need to roll that out over a number of years. So you don't hit your ratepayers really hard at the beginning.
the other thing is, I don't think anybody would expect a company that's focused on suburban sprawl to be as cost effective as the city who's dealing with the densest development in the county. That density is the ace in the hole for cost efficiency.
So it depends on the service though. USD does a terrible job at both places. I mean, we didn't find anything homogeneous anywhere in the course of looking at all of this. And my concern was that when we look at the amount that is attributed to Metro, it is difficult sometimes to not think that they're getting the benefit, for example, of not planning, or the fact that their employees are more expensive, generally speaking, than waste hauler employees, but are those expenses incorporated into this? And I from the words, I think you did a great job in this, negative, but the words don't tell me an answer.
I mean, I also think that when you have unionized labor, which the
It
city
costs more.
does, it does cost more.
But then how can that number be way lower?
Well, because of density.
See, I don't think.
Well, part of it also is we did not include profit in there, which we'll get to because that was a number of the questions. Right.
You know, the other thing is you keep your people. When you pay them well and you provide them health insurance and retirement, you keep them.
And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good.
Well, point taken, but the Teamsters is at least known for holding their people to the rules.
One thing that really, started jumping early, you haven't gotten my questions yet, but problem I have is most of those city trucks, USD trucks have 3 people.
Right.
So how could they?
Most of the independent haulers have 1. And understand the density issue. You have 3 union wages with benefits in a truck, and you're providing cost of $20. We would have to have a lot of discussion on a granular basis before you can convince me of that.
That's totally fair. Well, let's just keep it going. We're eventually gonna get there. Fingers
Okay.
crossed. Let's see. Are we still on table
I
one?
did actually 3 pages. If you feel a need to skip some of them where people don't have to.
Very good.
Did you like them?
Well,
Yeah.
It's worth it.
It's about 3 pages from
She had
everyone,
to read
so.
them too.
All right, Harold, do you want to go to the next one, please? We lose you, Harold.
Before Harold.
We just go by the letter? Why don't, I mean, if you've got the letter on your computer, why don't we just work through the key questions?
So, well, I have all of them here, but Harold's the one sharing it for the people
I
online.
think it might be
Oh,
really
yeah.
Karen,
I mean, they can at
Actually,
least hear you.
actually, for you guys as well, he's sharing it.
I know, and now.
I mean, the truth of the matter is,
Thank you, and I apologize for it.
Well, at least to keep it going, how about I just read the questions and the answer at the same time? Everyone good with that? Okay. So the next one was, where is the additional labor of the 2 USD workers factored into the cost? Have similar needs been identified in other areas? Individual contract areas use 2 or 3 man crews also. Answer, yes, the USD's labor costs in the $22.77 per month figure include the full crew complements needed for collection. Metro's operations use both single driver automated trucks and multi-person rear loader crews in alleys. The cost allocation from Metro Public Works inherently covers all the workers on those crews, drivers and helpers. In the study's benchmarking, staffing costs were taken from Metro's budget, which includes wages and benefits for the necessary 2 or 3 person crews on routes where manual assistance is required. Similarly, in other areas like smaller cities or private hauler operations, multi-person crews are used for labor-intensive routes, and those costs are reflected in their pricing. Cost model and comparisons assumed like-for-like staffing for similar service scenarios, so USD was not given a cost penalty for additional workers. It's already baked into the USD cost figure.
just to be clear, I have lived on street houses in the USD with an alley and without, and I've always had a 3-person crew because they're collecting on both sides of the street. So it's not just the people who, we don't have a lot of one-armed bandits, I don't think, in the city.
Yeah, especially in downtown, right?
Well, I mean, I'm in the Highlands.
Oh, okay.
Yes, there's some one-armed bandits in the Highlands, but you got to go further out, the more modern construction with the street. Everybody has a driveway, so there's not cars everywhere.
Right. Yeah, the space issue definitely makes sense.
And in that sense, if you were to franchise into the suburbs, there would be a competitive advantage because you could use more one-armed bandits because most people have driveways and don't leave their car on the street next to the roll cart.
That's already happened.
No, I'm agreeing. I'm just saying that in a way, this probably isn't as bad as everybody worries about.
Well, particularly also, we didn't consider HOAs, which, generally they're all exclusive contracts anyways. So they're already operating like exclusive franchises in those areas. We just don't have the data from the HOAs. Okay, looks like we're back. Let's see, next question. Cool. Thanks, Harold. Okay, word of the data, which indicate 3% of the unincorporated areas have no waste hauling come from. What data supports that? That group includes large holdings that with waste disposal resources. So we leveraged a prior supported study in which many of the stakeholders for this project were stakeholders of, which was the Louisville Jefferson County 5-year solid waste management plan. And then there's a link that we have to this. So that's where we got
So
it
that
from.
data could actually be.
True.
5-year plan.
Right.
But
That was
the 5-year
also
plan
provided in
took
the
it off of that
RFP to
last
us
study
to begin with.
Almost 10 years ago.
What do we mean by large land
Oh,
holdings?
Actually, I thought this was the one, it doesn't ever say 3%.
Well, but it couldn't include USD, and it doesn't include places with contracts, so it has to be the unincorporated.
It could include USD if it's an apartment building and the landlord's being a real doofus and hadn't gotten busted.
Would you pick up there anyway?
Either way, I
Not
think
if
the
it's too
data
many
comes from
units.
that plan.
Right.
It's not necessarily.
Okay.
You could argue it's relatively negligible.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, just to get the confirmation on the 3,200, we use the US data set.
So-
3% of the total, but sorry, I read this one and I was
Where
thinking
was
about
3%
the
and it said
number, the
9,000?
number of unincorporated, like 3% of unincorporated is not the same number as 3% of the entire county, even if that 3% is only in the unincorporated area.
But then the number is 3,200 on one of the early slides. And,
Right.
and we're clearly saying,
Seven.
where is it coming
What
We
did
got
you
the
mean?
3,200 specifically from USPS.
What did you mean about large land holdings? Do you mean something like Norton Commons that has an
from?
HOA?
No, something like a farm down in the southwest part.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
something like that,
okay.
where they may have their own method, they may need their own method. In other words, I don't think we can say.
Right. Yeah,
this
that
is
was our way of checking
I
it.
agree, I think.
Negligible, yeah. And if it becomes more affordable, it becomes less of a problem.
Agreed.
All right, next slide, please. All right, I'll read
Please
it.
take it.
If the unincorporated areas were included in a system, that might be the monthly amount they might pay for uniformity using current data. To some unincorporated area residents currently pay more than others with the individual waste haulers. In other words, do individual waste haulers have rates for all of Jefferson County, or are different areas charged separately? So under the modeled exclusive franchise system, the unincorporated households were projected to pay on the order of 45 to 70 per month on average within the 10-year forecast for the full waste service package, though it varied by zone density. So in year one, the 6 zones estimated cost range from about $39.86 up to $62.72 per month, zone 5 being the highest due to the very low density. Many zones came in around the mid-40s, which is comparable to what a lot of the open market customers already paid for trash recycling and yard waste combined. So if a unified franchise were implemented within the current cost structure, densely populated areas might see monthly fees in the low 40s, whereas sparsely populated areas could be higher. As noted, zone 5 was 63 or around $63. Currently in the open market, individual haulers set rates that can indeed vary by neighborhood and service level. The study's secret shopper survey, which found trash and recycling subscriptions as low as $27 per month in some cases, and up to around $39 in others. And when adding yard and bulky services, some quotes reached $45 to $55 per month. These differences depend on the provider and options selected rather than the formal geography-based pricing. However, indirectly, areas that are harder to serve or service, such as rural roads and distance from landfills, often face higher quotes.
2 questions. Did you mean to leave out recycling when you said when you add in yard waste and bulk waste?
Oh, I mentioned recycling, I think above, so,
Okay.
no, that was all
Good.
inclusive.
So hypothetically, I want to bring up that in this country, when it came to the provision of electricity and telephones and natural gas a century or plus ago, the businesses didn't want to do the people in the less dense areas because it was too expensive. And one of the reasons we created natural monopolies was to spread out that cost so people in less developed areas, this is rhetorical, could afford to have the services that other people could have. Isn't this also a way in which, if we chose, we could ensure that everybody got the same services for the same fee, even if the cost of providing the service varied from this neighborhood to that neighborhood?
Yes. Okay. This side. Okay, next slide. Cool. So what costs are included in the public sector rates for staffing? Finish that. So the USD itemized cost data encompasses all the major expense categories for providing the service. So the staffing in the USD model includes the wages of drivers and crew, plus the standard metro benefits, including health insurance, retirement contributions, et cetera, that are budgeted as personnel costs. The report then shows separate lines for things like insurance and administrative overhead to mirror how the metro budget budgets those things. So the insurance also, just to note that, refers to operational insurances such as vehicle liability coverage, workers' comp, et cetera, while the administrative overhead captures indirect support costs allocated to the waste program. So in effect, nothing is left out. The public sector costs were accounted for in full, but they were broken down into transparent costs such as labor, fleet, fuel, maintenance, insurance, et cetera. By contrast, a private hauler's quoted price inherently rolls in all those elements, including their corporate overhead and profit, into one number. The study's methodology captured Metro's all-in cost. For fair comparison, we ensured that overhead and insurance for USD were included. Noting that USD's overhead was relatively low, as some support costs are shared across Metro departments. We will make sure to update the report clearly to list what's included in each category.
Question. Does the private sector offer retirement benefits and health insurance to all their tippers?
I would say that varies by the hauler.
Me too. Just wanted to make that clear.
Next slide. Okay, so while illegal dumping is stated as an outcome of fractured system in uncorporate areas, Figure 6 areas of illicit behavior overlaid on Figure 4 and incorporate areas seem to bear this out. Okay, so the 311 data on illegal dumping shows incidents across both the urban and the rural parts of the county. So indeed, like many of the reported dumping sites are in the urban core, often in the alleys and vacant lots within the USD. The report's point is not that uncorporate areas are the only places with dumping, but that having 3% of the households with no service is a risk factor that can contribute to dumping problems. So in other words, the lack of universal trash system in the county is one driver of illegal dumping behavior, alongside with factors like personal habits and lack of enforcement. So the map in Figure 6, which we don't have a copy, well, unless you have the, but you'll get this eventually, may show more pens in urban zones simply because population and the 0-1 reporting is denser there. However, the unincorporated areas see issues too. For example, the rural dumping of appliances or burn piles. The report explicitly notes that illegal dumping is a countywide issue, but that the absence of service in unincorporated areas is a contributing factor to those incidents. So the variation in the map reflects where reports were made, but qualitatively, Metro staff have observed that when people don't have trash pickups, some dispose improperly. In the report, we can clarify that nuance. Next slide.
I mean, I want to say, having worked as a civil servant for many years, people who dump leave their junk mail in there. You just go through it and you find out whose crap it is. And people dump in the county too. Every sewage treatment plant and pumping station gets dumped on, for example. It isn't just in the city. I think part of it is just, it's more noticeable in the city because of the immediacy of the neighbors, and maybe it gets called in because of that.
Right. Okay, so 3.3, explanation of the ArcGIS spatial tools used to posit 6 hypothetical service zones. Okay, so an explanation of how we came up with the 6 zones. So they were developed through multi-criteria GIS analysis to balance several factors. And the criteria included the density of the households, so the parcel/address data, geographic continuity and natural boundaries such as major roads and rivers, proximity to key infrastructure like landfills or transfer stations, and existing hauling patterns and route logistics. We aimed for those zones so that each had a manageable number of households, so roughly 10,000 to 26,000 homes each, depending, while keeping similar communities together and avoiding a mix of very dense and very rural extremes in one zone. So that's why we kind of split them the way that we did. Why 6? The number was chosen as a strategic balance. It creates enough zones to foster competitive bidding and allow multiple haulers to participate without having so many tiny zones that efficiency is lost. So additionally, many successful franchise systems use 48 zones for similar sized counties, so 6 was a reasonable starting point.
Did you say 48 or 428?
4 to 8.
Okay,
I
thank you.
thought you said that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, wait.
It was a little exciting.
Yeah, 48 would be crazy. So each zone is indeed distinct in its makeup. For example, zone 3 and 4 are denser suburban, zone 5 is very rural, and the model acknowledges that by yielding different costs per zone. What the study flags as negative is not the inherent uniqueness of an area, but the wide inequality in service levels and costs under the status quo. In the current open market, some areas have curbside recycling and some don't. Some pay double what others pay for the same service. The variation is what we aim to address. So under the franchising, each zone can still have a different unit cost reflecting its density, and a hauler can tailor operations to local needs, but every zone's residents would at least receive a baseline comprehensive service package. Working on that, I'll go to the next one. Okay. So 4.1 is the 2277 per household figure based on the 25 tax-based cost allocation created from the cost provided by Metro Public Works. So no, the 2277 per month per household figure is based on the 10-year forecast. That is to accommodate a fleet replacement cycle and fluctuating maintenance repair needs based on the average age of the fleet. So the year 1 cost for Metro Public Works is approximately $1947. All of the projections are based either on Metro's existing fleet to build out a replacement cycle for equipment based on current age or the actual Metro Public Works annual budget.
What was the base year?
The base year.
Yeah, like if to do projections, you got to pick a base year.
We use this as the base year. This would be
Okay,
year
so I think
one.
that's what she's asking. Really.
Okay. 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 Next one. So table 11, again, without details, evaluating the major differences between the zones is difficult. Okay, so this is about the overhead franchise fees and whether that's included.
That essentially, we're not there yet.
Correct. We did not incorporate those. So previously, we discussed what the operating components were: labor, equipment, disposal, processing, etc. But a separate city imposed franchise fee was not added on top of any of the modeled zones. So that would obviously increase the cost. Next slide. Okay, so essentially this model might cost property owners $500 to $700 more than their current metro taxes or. Okay, so the report's modeled year one household costs across the zone range approximately from $39.86 to $62.72 per month, with 10-year averaging about $44.31 to $69.78. These model costs are in the same general range as many of the current open market bills, while including services not universally available today, such as yard waste and bulky waste. The report does not calculate the exact household counts that would pay more or less. So instead, it's presented zone level cost ranges and explaining the cost drivers, such as the density and the route efficiency. Determining how many households would see savings would require a comparison of model costs to each household's actual current bill, which we don't currently have.
No, I can see what you're saying. For example, I know someone who lives in Linden. They're not paying for the extra services. If we went ahead and did this and added, for the sake of argument, franchise fees plus required them to get the additional, there's a public relations component at the very least that we have to incorporate into our thing.
What do you mean by franchise fee?
You can't have a district without having somebody in charge of it. And for the sake of argument, they did a good job, and it's in the report. Other places that have implemented this are charging for their administrative overhead. And in Cincinnati, for example, that was 25%. Another one you found was 31%. If you take those, put them on top of whatever base is, you start looking at this, and you're not comparing 2277 to 68. You're comparing a much different.
So why is it so high?
Because
Franchise
they're
fees?
bureaucrats.
Well, is it the bureaucrats or not? I mean,
think it is.
let's see. I mean, go ahead.
So the franchise fees would be determined by bureaucrats, whoever deciding, for actually I can't bring up the home rule cities. For other jurisdictions, for example, what the franchise fee does is it charges the hauler, basically charging them for the exclusive right to service that entire area. And that money is given back to the city or county, et cetera, as basically a check every year.
We don't have to
Sometimes
do
they're
that.
incorporating it into their property tax. Other times they're doing it. Bottom line is the person doesn't know in most cases they're paying for this, but we're part of what's at the beginning, so it's something we have to incorporate.
Right. I mean, I would give the example of the Louisville Water Company is a private for-profit corporation, all of whose stock just happens to be owned by the city of Louisville. And they are not regulated by the Public Service Commission. They don't do a cost of service study to figure out how much they're going to charge for water. I'm not making any of this up, I promise you. They decide how many millions of dollars do they want to make each year, and they back it into the rate structure. And it's just a thing they do to raise money to do other programs that have nothing to do with water. And that's what it sounds like you're talking about. And we don't have to do that.
No,
Correct, yeah,
no,
you
and
don't
she's
have to
not
do a
suggesting that.
franchise fee.
All I'm saying is, we need to realize that in some ways, what we're looking at now is not what would come out of for even taking one district, one franchise and putting it together, because we have to incorporate these other thoughts in there.
Right.
And so we're looking at an open market model that includes all fees with a closed market model that at this point in time does not include all fees.
Right.
I promise you that if the average person in the unincorporated area found out they were paying much more than somebody else, I bet there'd be a whole lot more community interest in this discussion. You know.
I don't have trouble with that. I'm just.
But I also
Potentially,
think,
it is a significant annual fee that we're talking about for some parts of our, and that's why at some point in time, we have to look at that.
and I think that maybe this advisory committee needs to say to the board, we don't want this to become a cash cow. We want this to get the job done and not be a profit center.
That's all.
You know, I got no problem with that at all.
On the other hand.
We have the control.
That's.
Who? We can certainly make a recommendation, but,
We can make a recommendation.
Yeah.
On our board, and
they can ignore us if they
then it
want.
goes to city council.
Yeah,
Right.
and then it goes to
Right.
the bureaucrats or the mayor, the elected officials, and.
Well,
we have
I
no
think,
control over
I
that.
think you need to remember that the mayor is running for reelection next year. Half of the Metro Council's running for reelection next year. They're gonna have their thumb on this one.
Well, I just want to look at it, apples to apples. What's interesting, there's a piece in your number that's missing, that's that administrative cost. It's the bad debt expense, all the things that go into the franchise fee. And that's not added into the 2277.
No, but that's to
So it could
acknowledge
be-
that it
Well, there's no
exists.
such thing as
I thought
bad
it was
debt in the USD version.
There is none.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there is in the real
Of course.
world. So when we look at how we balance these hypothetical rates, you know, they do become a bit more even when you add in that 20% franchise fee and 20% margin.
So,
Because private companies have to make money. It's not like we can tax anybody their way. We have to make a profit.
so,
Absolutely.
yeah, but I'll also point out that if we don't want the city to make profit off this, but we do want the private sector to make profit, we might need to talk about how much profit's tolerable.
Well, and you're
Which
really
does happen
controlling-
in contract
Pardon?
negotiations
and
for
you're really
franchises.
getting control.
I don't
over-
want to, but I'm just
Isn't their profit
saying.
Can be factored into their bid. I mean, they're.
That it
they're-
should
they're
be.
taking a gamble and say, we
Should
think
be.
we can make this much of a profit and still win this franchise.
Right.
But that
And if they
doesn't deal
overbid,
with-
then they lose the
but
franchise,
that
and if they
doesn't deal with
underbid,
the
then.
overhead
Which they
component
do
of
all the
bureaucracy.
Mm.
See, that, they would be contained, but the overhead component of the bureaucracy is not contained.
No, I
So
understand.
can we assume that we're not going to do an RFQ, much less an RFP, without having determined what the franchise fee would amount to?
I don't think we're there yet.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, how do other cities do this? Do other cities go in and say, we want to make 10 million on this? What does it work out to be?
No, actually, with one of the cities, and I think you also have that in your report, one of the cities starts at like 10% and then whips to, it was at Cincinnati and whips up to 25%.
Yeah, I think we need, but I think we, hypothetically, we as a city can decide what we want to do, and we don't have to use it as a profit center.
Well,
Not
that's
for the
accurate.
city.
I need
I
to put
think
whatever
not for
you
the
want
city.
in the franchise and then negotiate that.
Oh, our elected officials.
Yeah, I'm just saying though, they rely on us garbage nerds to tell them what we think, and I think we need to say, if you want to make this a profit center, you're going to clear the deal.
I mean, I think it would be in our best interest to not us, the Waste Management District, make a profit, but to keep the cost for all of the collections as low as possible.
Right.
To incentivize
Right.
those franchise residents to go
That's-
along with it.
That's exactly what I'm
If we
saying.
had any sort of profit into it, ultimately, they're just gonna pay more, and what are we gonna do with the money? Our interest is to make their rates as low as possible and get the most efficient
But then are
service.
we going to do that by taking the open market operators and curtailing? I mean, it's not a simple.
But isn't the real
The limitation is we only have the competition at the front end bidding part, and
Right.
once that's been awarded, then we kind of lose that leverage.
But isn't the real question, are we going to maintain the status quo, or are we going to give it our best shot to make it better? Because I don't know about you all, but I'm not coming here to maintain the status quo.
Well,
Boring.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Carolyn. That's what we've been challenged to do.
Right.
Is to look at this thought and see if these facts lead us down this path. I, for one, am not seeing that path at this point in time. I've only spent 35 years, in this industry. Maybe my eyesight's going bad, but
Well, we'll get to your question
No.
soon, apparently.
Yeah, I
We'll
think
get to
I'm
some
up.
of
I
them.
got almost.
You mentioned is like yard waste.
Mhm.
Let's say it's now franchised. Do I pay for do I lose the option to say what services I want in my household, and I'm now?
Yes,
every.
because the bid
Yeah.
would have to have.
Well, you can also write into the agreement that certain things like yard waste are optional.
But
And
then
then-
you've got a bureaucratic bill paying system.
Not necessarily. I mean, Rumpke can still use its billing system for a whole zone. There's no reason why the government has to do it.
Well,
Yeah,
but
but he doesn't collect.
somebody,
But he's doing it now.
but no,
does it
but
now.
but they're not.
But if somebody did pay him, he could service it.
Exactly.
Well, we could have that clause. I mean, y'all act like we aren't in charge. I think we are in charge. Meaning the city can do what it needs to do to meet the municipal needs. Nobody can
But
tell
so
us we
far,
have to
I
do
have
certain
to-
things.
Strongly disagree with you on that point, Carolyn.
Be more specific, please.
The city does not own a disposal facility,
Okay?
so they are not in charge. Because what are you gonna do with all this stuff when you get it in a truck if you don't own the landfill?
How does that come up with the franchise, the
No,
collection
you made a
process?
statement that we are in charge.
Okay, let me
We are
rephrase
not in
it.
charge.
I'll
We
rephrase
are
it.
making a recommendation, or we are considering a recommendation.
I'll rephrase it. The city of Louisville policymakers and decision makers have the authority and the freedom to design a program that meets the city's needs most ideally without taking advantage of people or companies. The city can do that. Y'all, it sounds like you're just assuming somebody's gonna screw somebody. And I'd argue somebody might already be screwing somebody, but $88 is a lot of money. Because the way that sentence reads, they're not even getting recycling.
Well, depends a lot on where that $88 is, and it can be explained. I don't know that is a topic, a large problem. Well, we should just move on because, this debate's gonna take a lot longer.
I know.
And we can discuss it.
But just
as
remember,
adults.
we never would have gotten electricity, much less telephones throughout the country if it weren't for a model like this.
On the other hand, we can also look at those models and realize that in this world, they don't work.
Well, I've lived in a country where mobile phones don't get a signal, and I was really glad for a landline, you know?
I hear you, and then we look at our sewer bills and we say, oh
That's a different
my
reason.
God.
Don't make me send you my scholarly journal article on that.
Oh, actually, I want
Okay.
Unfortunately, we're at 6:05. And
Okay, we're gonna blow through some of these because some of them we've already addressed, but I also think the answers for some of them can be very simple. So Harold, can you go to the next question? So this is just about the services, what the service package actually looks like.
yeah, you can, we've already.
Yeah,
done that.
we've already talked about that. So backdoor service, that was not included, for example. Next one. Okay, so the information wasn't obtained on individual service contracts and uncorporate areas specific to the same exact services. So the secret shopper survey explicitly requests quotes for the same comprehensive services for consistency. So it was same services we had talked about previously.
So it was always yard waste.
Correct.
So what is secret shopper?
The marketing company, they call you and say, what are you paying for trash?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
We knew.
Yeah, do we need more detail on that one? Anyone? Okay, since most comparisons in the report relate to USD with open market waste haulers, recommendation for a franchise is market waste hauler requires more explanation. How do we go from the USD model? 6 districts. Okay. Do you guys feel like we've covered this, or do you want me to go?
No.
Okay. Okay. Next one. Now we're on to Bruce's questions. Okay. Let's see. Resident in the area. Garbage collection, which